OGLEE in the house once again. Thank goodness, thank goodness. So the guilty verdict is in for those three assholes who chased down and killed Ahmaud Arberry on February 23rd, 2020. This guy in the middle, the neighbor, he always has the scaredest, stupidest look on his face. They are going to fight over him in prison. Almost 2 years to the day, they're being found guilty of federal hate crime. And I think that's a major victory, not just for the Arbery family, but for black people at large. Because it didn't matter who you were. Being black, white people thought it was okay to chase you down and do whatever to try to apprehend you for the police. And so this is going to make a whole lot of white people think, hey, I'm not getting involved. I better do the right thing and call the police and let them do their job. I'm not going to chase anybody down and try to hold them for the police. I'm not going to try to think that because I used to work in the prosecutor's office, I could handle this. And no, you're going to do what every citizen's supposed to do. Call the police if you think anyone, not just black people, but if you think anyone's committing a crime, you call the police and you let them do their job. This is justice now. These people did something that was illegal, and they got found guilty of it on the state level as well as the federal level. Mrs. Arbery called them out for this, and that is, you, on January 31st, you were going to strike a deal with these guys. With these three defendants, you were going to strike a deal. And the deal basically was saying that these guys were going to plead guilty and they were going to be able to do their federal, they were going to be able to serve their sentence in a federal prison as opposed to in a state prison where they were found guilty at first. And the prosecution went along with this. So they entered a guilty plea and they were going to do 30 years, but to be served in a federal prison. And the prosecutor in one, Tara Lyons, was willing to go along with that. And the family balked loud. And finally, the judge rejected that plea deal. And guess what? When the judge rejected the plea deal, all of a sudden, they weren't guilty anymore. They entered a plea, formally entered a guilty plea. But when the judge rejected them serving time in federal prison, all of a sudden they decided to go to trial, which today they were found guilty on all charges. And I have to say hallelujah, because we know, if you know, that if you serve time in a federal prison versus a state prison, that's almost like a cakewalk. And they know that. So the judge rejected it, and rightfully so. Their lawyers were smart to try to do that, right? Because in state prison, they are going to have a much harder time hiding and protecting themselves. And believe you me, if they don't catch protective custody, PC or Punk City, them boys are going to be dead. I don't necessarily want them to be killed in prison, but if that's their fate, that's their fate. What they were saying to the Arbery family, to the country, to the world, in front of God and everybody, that even though these white men were found guilty of killing your son, they still should be afforded some comforts as they serve their time in prison for murder. You got time to be served, and you could serve it in state prison or federal prison. Let's let them do it in the best conditions possible, even though they were murderers. And this is the feds. So this is definitely a case of what we would call institutional racism, because had his family not balked, and again, balked loud, these guys would be serving their time in federal prison. Federal prison is a cakewalk compared to state prison. And everyone who's been experienced in that knows it. So this right here was a victory, but I'm glad his family kept their nose to the grindstone and kept making sure, because they were going to try to sneak this deal by. And these are the federal prosecutors. But today you see that they got a guilty verdict from a jury, which that means that the prosecution underestimated what they could prove. Even though they were found guilty in state court, they thought they had a harder road to toe on the federal level. So they were willing to basically let these guys cop a plea. But it wasn't just a plea wherein they were going to serve time like anybody else you would have thought after they served their state time. No, they were going to say that this guilty plea is going to usurp anything that the state decided. So this is something to look at, because if a case doesn't make major news, like this Arbery case, you basically have the feds making a deal. Now, don't get me wrong. Most 92% of federal cases end in plea bargains. But in this case, it was just a little more egregious in that it wasn't just a plea bargain to do time. It was a plea deal to usurp the state charges and have them serve their time in the federal prison. And so that is what is dastardly, and that is by our federal government. So I'm glad that Arbery stood up to that and made it seem like you were really serving us an injustice by doing this. And they actually were. So everything worked out, and these three assholes now, they've got to serve time for the rest of their lives, basically, because one of the guys, the father, I guess he's damn near 65 or something like that, or older. So his ass is going to probably die in prison. And I don't hate that for him, because he helped his son kill somebody. And you have to start thinking that black lives matter. Anyway, this is OGLEE, and I'll see you again soon.